Hello and welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Rosie and you're welcome to listen in to a conversation I'm having with Teresa Carter. Welcome, Teresa.
Hi, thank you for having me, Rosie. I'm very excited about being here.
And I'm so excited about our conversation today. Teresa is a contemporary portraitist living and working in Fort Mill, South Carolina. She's also the art director and overseer for Kingdom Arts at Morning Star Fellowship Church. Now, although portraits is her main focus, she's also drawn to all aspects of creativity. Her work has exhibited in many shows, and although most of her works are 2D, she also has designed and constructed art installations. So, Teresa, today our topic is about partnering with Holy Spirit in creative work. Can you share a little bit about how you actually do that?
Well, the journey with Holy Spirit started quite a few years ago, where the Lord was showing me in my own process, in my own redemptive process. The Lord would speak to me in a visual language. I'm a visual learner, so most of what I understand is things in the world around me. So the Lord would use a lot of metaphors and a lot of allegorical kinds of imagery to share a concept with me. And that just kind of started to carry over into my artwork. And so the concepts that he has shown me have become sort of a visual language that he and I speak in. Mostly in flowers. He speaks to me a lot in flowers, which I love. And so I end up, putting those on canvas. I put it, sometimes I'll have a vision and that will end up on my canvas if it's something that I feel like other people could benefit from. And so I kind of call myself a spiritual visual interpreter of, spiritual, metaphor and things like that. And
love it. Yeah.
a translator of those things. Yeah.
That's so cool. So can you share an example of, that process of, the flower and what kind of concept that could be? Just an example so we can kind of be on it with you.
Sure, absolutely. So the Lord was speaking to me about the renewing of our minds, and in the Spirit, he would take me to a garden. And when we first looked at my garden, there were a whole lot of weeds in my garden, and a whole lot of, there were flowers trying to make their way to the surface and everything, but mostly it was weeds. And I was like, okay, what's that? And he says, well, these are, kind of represent the lies that you're coming into agreement with. And we need to get rid of those, right? So we would weed the garden, and he would show me, what was truth, the truth in his word, and what was not, was the truth or the lie of the enemy. And so I did this one particular painting that I saw this woman with flowers coming out of her head, and I said, okay, what is that, Lord? And he said, well, those are your thoughts, right? And he says, the thoughts that you think about yourself and that you think about others, you put that in the atmosphere around you, and it's like blossoms or flowers. So we can put weeds out there, or we can put beauty with flowers. And so I painted this woman, and she's purple. That was actually my underpainting. I was gonna layer her flesh color on top of that, but I posted it on Instagram, and everybody was like, no, keep her purple. Keep her purple. We dig the purple. And so I thought, okay, so she's purple, and that kind of represents royalty. So I thought, all right, so she represents everyone in that respect. And so in this painting, the flowers are coming out of her head, and they're beautiful. It's like a beautiful bouquet, like a flower crown. But she's also got her eyes on this dark water below her, and the dark water is still her circumstances. She's still looking at her circumstances, so she's not quite there yet. And she's got a few weeds coming out, here and there. So it sort of signifies part of that process of renewing our minds. And so I carried on the series with that. And so the next painting after that, she's her head is above the clouds and she's sort of looking around, and she's got less weeds, and so she's got a higher perspective. And then the last painting in that series, her face and the flowers are becoming one. They're sort of meshing together, and her eyes are not looking around anywhere. Her eyes are like they're fixed on the Lord. And so her thoughts have become one with his thoughts. And so that's a bit what that represents. And so when people look at the work, the first question is, okay, why is she purple? And why are there flowers coming out of her head? And, what is that dark water? And what is that all about? And I love those questions because that starts the conversation.
It's fascinating. And it really speaks to me, especially because I do think our thought life is so important. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and it affects our feelings and our behaviors. And yeah, it's scope for anything, the good and the bad, right? And it speaks to me because for me to have that visual, it makes it more real and more impactful and highlights their importance. So it really encourages you to kind of, take your thoughts captive and also be aware, have that awareness of the importance. I love it so much. And I was really blown away by how you mentioned even taking it into the garden and you're with Holy Spirit there. And yeah, it's so beautiful. And I'm loving the bouquet of flowers you have behind you right now. It's so
yes,
yeah. Yes. And immediately when we were chatting about that, I just thought about that. And hopefully I have nice thoughts also with the green leaves kind of behind me or on my shoulder.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, so you're sharing there about art. I'm also wondering, how can we partner with Holy Spirit in other areas? If you imagine people listening, maybe doing accounting or a teacher, art is very visual. How can we do similar sort of partnering in other spheres?
Wow. Just by the very nature of who we are as God's children, we are all creative. Every single one of us is creative. Our creativity comes out in the ways that God has placed talents and gifts in us, and things that we're bent towards. I think accountants are geniuses because I can't do math. The maths escape me. But I see so much creativity in numbers and in God's created order. If you look at fractal geometry, that will show you God's created order. Just Google fractal geometry, look at the beauty that is revealed in that, and you'll see that math is very creative. Any scientist will tell you that math is creative. If you look at people like George Washington Carver, who's attributed to inventing peanut butter, that kind of thing. What really the story is that, he was Christian, following the Lord, and he wanted to know this, the secrets, and the Lord said, well, I'll show you the secret of the peanut. And he came out with hundreds of inventions in agriculture and all these different ways. And that's creativity right there. Teaching a classroom of children, that takes an amazing amount of creativity. My husband was a teacher, and he taught art from kindergarten through college age and beyond. Wrote curriculum, and he was quite brilliant at it as being a teacher, because what he did was he partnered with Holy Spirit when he would come to a student who would refuse to do a certain assignment or something, and he could tell they were a bit troubled about something in their life. He sought for a way to bring out their creativity by partnering with the Holy Spirit to say, okay, what is it that's going to unlock them? What is it? Okay, they don't want to do this, so let's go over here and try this. And so many times he would find their thing right? The thing that sort of like, well, I can't draw, but but I can splatter paint, and that makes me happy. And that's partnering with Holy Spirit. Um, partnering with Holy Spirit in anything that you do. Chefs are extraordinarily creative to me. People who make food and present food in a beautiful way. So I think it's just whatever God has placed in your heart, in your bent, and in the way that He made you. Find and explore with Holy Spirit the different expressions of creativity that can bring about.
I love that so much. So generally explore with Holy Spirit, your field. And also it sounds like what you were saying about your husband, when you reach a problem, you don't have to wait for a problem as such, but when you do reach something like, I'm not able to get a particular learner to engage, ask Holy Spirit to inspire you and find a way. Yeah, that's great. Have you ever hit any obstacles at all in your process, or in, I know you mentor people, right? Also, perhaps in people that have come to you that have said, I've tried that, but
Yeah, there's just obstacles in life in general.
Yeah.
But for the artist, I think perfectionism has probably been my greatest obstacle. I was trained in an atelier to do portraiture. I have a 5-year degree in painting, a BFA in painting, and then I didn't quite get the education that I wanted. I wanted to paint portraits, and Lord said, well, go back to school. And so I did, and I found an atelier and joined that and learned classical realism, and was really sort of not satisfied with a lot of my early works because they weren't perfect enough for me. They weren't real enough for me. And that became this kind of sore, it's a creativity killer. Perfectionism is a creativity killer. And I came to believe, over the course of wrestling with that issue, there was a lot of self-worth issues that I was struggling with about perfectionism, and if I can't do it perfectly, then I'm just not good enough, that kind of things. And those were the things I had to, take to the Lord and get dealt with, right, about our worth. So perfectionism can be a worth issue. It's also sort of a falsity. I mean, if we take on the view that there's nothing perfect under heaven and there's nothing perfect but God, right? Yeah. Then everything that we do is going to be less than perfect. So right there, we get a pass. Right there, we get permission to not do it perfectly. And so what I kind of landed on was, I'm going to do this to the best of my ability, and I can be satisfied with that. And so when I look at other work and I critique other work and I look at other artists' work, if I know that they're doing their best, then I say, well done, good job, because they are doing, to the extent of their ability. And if they want to learn more, there's always that opportunity. So I'm constantly educating myself and taking workshops, to hone my skill and to improve, but I'm not seeking perfectionism anymore. I'm seeking, how far can I go? That's my question. How far can I go down this road? What more can I learn? Okay. And so if we're teachable, that's more important than perfectionism.
That's brilliant. Teresa, I'm wondering also, have you had many stories or testimonies or, of people who have encountered your art and fed back to you and said, wow, I felt something for this, and have you been able to link that with Holy Spirit's, how you've partnered with Holy Spirit?
Sure, absolutely. The wonderful thing about art is that it can bypass words, right? So picture paints 1,000 words. I love that. And there's some other quotes that I really love that go along that line, where you could write pages and pages, but you'll get your point across with just one image. And there have been images over the years that have spoken to me so profoundly that they've just brought me to tears. And so my prayer is when I do create something and I do put it out there for the world to see, that it is something that someone can look at and it can touch a place in their heart or in their soul that needs touching. In particular, when my husband, Michael, has gone on to be with the Lord, and he was very sick for about 5 years. And the Lord took me in a vision down into this valley. It was very, 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 it was pitch dark, and I was clinging to the back of his robe, and I could feel death all around me. And I was pretty terrified. And we got to the bottom, and I couldn't see anything. And he turned around and he put his hands on my shoulders, and the sun came out and the birds were singing and the flowers were blooming and everything looked beautiful, but I could still feel death right here. And he said, death. And he said, you know where you are? And I said, yes, this is the valley of the shadow of death, right? And he said, yes. He says, but while you're on earth, this is the reality of it. You're going to encounter death. But it's okay because I've overcome death, right? He said, in this life you will have trouble, but take heart because I've overcome it. And you need to make peace with it because it's a matter of perspective, right? Oh, and that was very hard for me to grasp at the time. And he said, you need to be okay with everything, even death. And so I grappled with that for a long time. And there was an image that I wanted to paint, and it was this woman pulling off the grave clothes. And she had her face turned, and she has her face in these roses. And part of her is sort of see-through and ethereal looking, like she's sort of half here and half, gone. And she's pulling off these entanglements from death and from the enemy and all the things that he does, but she's got her eyes on the Rose of Sharon, and that represents Jesus. And I was painting that for my husband as he was passing away, sort of like, this is your resurrection painting, right? This is going to get you through to the end. And then when he went on to be with the Lord, I looked at that piece and I was like, oh Lord, it really is hard to be parted from someone. This is a really hard thing to wrap my head around. And the more I studied the work that I had done, I realized that it was for me, that it was my resurrection. It was my resurrection coming back from disappointment and heartache and grief. And so when I put that in the gallery, people that I have found that the people that gravitate towards that particular image are ones who have experienced loss. They just beeline for it, and they study it and they look at it. And then the tears come, when they look at the title, The Valley of the Shadow of Death. And then it gives me an opportunity to minister to them and to pray for them, and to say, you know what, I'm on the other side of that grief now. And I have a higher perspective of, that kind of loss. And I understand where you're at and I get it. So it doesn't negate the grief. It doesn't take away from the struggle and the hardship, that painting represents, but it gives you the hope that if you continue to fix your eyes on Jesus, you will come back to life. You will resurrect.
That's wonderful. And yeah, that must have been really hard, but thank you for grappling, being real, and journeying through to the other side, because of the amount of people that you've now inspired, that you've been able to minister to, and for you to have your own resurrection story through that. It's really wonderful. And I think it is important for us to be real about things, with our emotions, but with looking to hope.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Got to put that hope in there, or because there's too much in the world right now, in the art world in particular, that is so hopeless.
Mm.
And it shows the struggle and the pain. You look at the paintings and you see the struggle and the pain. You see the smeared identity, and you see the darkness, trying to take over. And those grieve me so much to look at, because I understand the pain.
Mm.
I know that it's coming from a real place, but I don't see the hope in it. And I feel very, that we have a responsibility to not just paint happy pictures, even though those are good too. We need those too, but to also be real in our process, but bring the hope.
Yeah. Teresa, just before we go, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you. I just wondered if you wanted to point people in the direction of any resources or anything you recommend that you've been on the journey you've been on, or anything that you've written or.
Okay, well, sure. Absolutely recommend Charity's books, Creative Fusion and the first one she wrote, all of those, Limitless. Naming the Animals by Stephen Roach is also a good one to consider. Let's see. I have actually written a book called Curio and the Land of Weight. And I wrote that 14 years ago. It's been a long journey. There's like an epic major motion picture journey with writing this book. We were homeless, actually. We were just suddenly homeless when my husband lost his job. We lost our house, we lost our car, we were upside down, and we didn't realize that we had just been plunged into our wilderness. And I was going to do a painting about kingdom. I had a vision about it. And I heard there once was a boy named Curio who lived in the land of weight.
Wow.
And so I went, what is that? And the Holy Spirit said, do you want to get on the ride and find out? And so I said, you know what? I don't have anything else to do. So yes, why not? So every day I sat poised and I listened. I felt more like a secretary than a writer. And I just wrote this book, and I wrote book 2, and book 3 is 10 chapters in. And it's gone through a lot of edits and a lot of roller coaster ride, and there's been a lot to that journey, but I just released it. It's up on Amazon. And I'm excited for the journey that Curio is going to take.
That is so amazing. Would you like to share a little bit about what the book's about?
Yes. So the vision that I had for Curio, before I knew it was Curio, I had this vision that I saw this young man leaving Earth behind, and he had his arms reached up to heaven and his eyes were fixed above him, and all of these things were falling off of him like shackles. There were shackles around his ankles, and they were attached to house and home and job and money and fame and fortune and all of those things that the world sort of ties around us and drags us down with. But he was fixing his eyes on things above, and he was seeking first the kingdom. And so I thought, that's a fabulous image. I'm going to paint that, right? So I was getting all my ducks in a row. I was taking photographs and I was lining up, the things that I do to create a piece of work. And that's when I heard Holy Spirit say, there once was a boy named Curio. So Wait, the land of Wait, W-A-T-E, represents both waiting, like we're waiting for Jesus to return, right? So we're in the process of waiting, and weight, W-E-I-G-H-T, right? So the weight of the world, the weights around our ankles. And so the story is allegorical. It's in a fantasy setting where when you first begin to learn to walk, they put weights around your ankles. And I don't want to give too much away in the plot, but our hero has to overcome these obstacles, and he goes in search of a long lost king. And there's mayhem and peril and action and bad guys and winged creatures and man-eating beasts, which is basically the angels and the demonic realm. And so it gives a lot of insight to this. It's kind of aimed at 12-year-old, and beyond, any age, but it kind of gives you some insights as to the way that the enemy operates with lies, and goes back to the renewing of our minds and things like that. So I'm excited for Curio. He's taken a long time to give birth to this baby. So, and he's sort of my gift to the world right now. So,
fascinating.
So
That's
yeah,
amazing. Well, I will get the link from you and pop the link in the description. So if you like the sound of that, then please have a look. And Teresa, it was wonderful chatting with you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Sure. I have totally enjoyed this time. Thank you so much, Rosie, for the opportunity. It's been wonderful to talk to you.